the American College of Vedic Astrology's webinar presentation, hosting our dear Ronnie Gale Dreyer to speak on eclipses for 2022. As it happens, this is the day of an eclipse, and we're talking about that very topic. It's kind of an interesting idea to present a webinar on the day of an eclipse, and I'm sure it will be memorable. So again, welcome, and thank you for sharing your Saturday with us. So these are interesting times, and our intention at the college is to offer you accurate information that'll make your life better in some way. So I just wanted to state that. My name is Charlotte Benson. I'm the president of the American College of Vedic Astrology, and we're honored to be able to offer you this knowledge through the wonderful medium of Zoom and the electronic media here. It's really still a miracle to me, but we're very glad to have you with us. So as our traditional procedure is to start with a mantra, and then I will be honored to introduce our speaker. So again, welcome and enjoy. I'm going to introduce our Dr. Lynn Butes, who is going to offer the mantra for us.
Om Gam Ganapatiye Namaha. Om Gam Ganapatiye Namaha. Om Gam Ganapatiye Namaha. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurupyo Namaha. Hari Om.
Thank you, Dr. Lynn. So, as I said previously, it's my distinct honor to introduce Ronnie Gale Dreyer to you. I know that there's so many participants here that already know Ronnie's work very well. That's why you're here. You and I could start off saying something trite like, this lady needs no introduction, but she's accomplished so much. I think it's really quite wonderful to be able to mention what she's done with her young life so far in astrology. So I've had the privilege of knowing Ronnie for years and years. I think you probably know that both Ronnie and I originally come from a Western astrology background, and Ronnie's so talented that she has a foot in both worlds, both Western astrology and Vedic astrology, and she has a real sense of community consciousness too. Ronnie and I worked together on the board of the American on AFAN. The American Federation of Astrologers Network back in the day, and also, of course, she has real scholarly attributes. I'm doing this from memory, so Ronnie wanted me to keep this brief. So anything I'm doing from memory, by definition, will be brief. But she has a Bachelor of Arts in English theater, and she has studied at Benares University. She lived in Holland for a long time. Ronnie has the moon in the 7th house, which sort of cracks me up that she lived in a foreign country. This makes perfect sense. She's written some wonderful books on astrology. This is one of my favorites. If you don't know about this one, of course, this has been in print since the beginning of time. I mean, long ago. God bless you, Ronnie, for writing that book on Venus. And so Ronnie was also my teacher at ACFA long ago. And boy, she was strict. You can't mess around with, she is serious about what she's putting out there. We do have a sense of humor, but of course she takes her subject very, very seriously. So she studied Sanskrit. She's worked, tirelessly to support the Jyotirvidya, not only in her personal practice, but but through organizations. So here she is in all her glory, pre her birthday, to share with us her one of her many areas of expertise, and that being eclipses. So, Ronnie, thank you so much for being here, my friend, and we look forward to what you have to tell us. So, thank you again.
Thank you, Charlotte. Let me just first share my screen to make sure that we're gonna share the screen. Can everybody see the screen? Meet the eclipses?
Yes.
Okay, cool. That's the first thing I just want to make sure. Thank you so much for that introduction. I always forget that I was teaching at ACFA when you were first coming as a student.
Yeah.
And yeah, and the Venus book, I'm glad, because I'm trying to get it revised. It needs a lot of revision. It was a Western book, and I'm trying now to put in a lot of the Indian material as well. So we'll see how that happens. You know, I was hoping to get some of it done for ESAR, but you know, I don't know if that's going to happen. We'll see. But thank you, Charlotte. Especially, you know, Charlotte really needs a lot of credit because she kind of was thrown into becoming the president of ACFA. For those of you who don't know, this is just going to take a very short time, but I think it's important, you know, that ACFA, the first president was Dennis Harness, and then when Dennis stepped down, Bill Levacy took the mantle, and it was really through Bill and other people, Michiel Bunder from Parashara's Light. They really got together and created the ACFA online program, which I was one of the early teachers for in 2004, 2005. It's been around for so long, and for those of you that, you know, are interested in getting certified, it's rigorous, you know, and it's a good program. And then Bill Levacy unfortunately left us too soon. He passed away, and Charlotte took the mantle. I believe Bill. I think Bill might have asked you to do it. I'm not sure. And it's, you know, for any of you that have worked in organizations and don't get paid for it, totally from service and you know, love. You know, I've done it, Charlotte's done it. It's a lot. It takes up a lot of your life. And the fact that Charlotte actually took this over, and now you've been the president for what, 6 years, 7 years, something like that.
It feels like that. Maybe
I don't know when Bill passed away. I forget.
2018, I think.
Okay. But you know, yeah. It's such a hard job, and you know, I really want to thank you for continuing, you know, ACFA. And yeah, and everybody else who's been a part of it.
Right.
Lynn, you know, Lynn Buddhist has come and really taken over as well. So, you know, and done a lot of lead work. So it is an organization. It's not just Charlotte, but president does a lot.
It's a team effort, and thank God there's so many talented people on the team. I'm very grateful for that. So
yeah. So, and before I begin, I just want to say this is a complimentary lecture. It's something I wanted to do because I really don't have time to teach. So it's my way to give to ACFA. And if you can make a donation, whatever you can make, please do so, because that's also part of the reason I want to do this as a somewhat of a fundraiser. So I guess that's ACFA, ACFA.org or ACFAonline.org/donate.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
And if you go, and so that's that. And you know, if you sign up for my newsletter, just go to ronniedreyer.com, my website. You can sign up for my newsletter, and you'll get a newsletter every month. Sometimes a lot of promotional stuff in between, because I'm always adding webinars and some conferences. And the next really good conference upcoming is at Arshavidya Gurukulam, which happens every year in Pennsylvania. And the last 2 years, of course, we couldn't meet in person. So this time I hope it's going to be in person, but it's going to be part web, and you know, you can do it virtually as well. And my website has all those links that you can go to. So anyway, so that's my little bit of just, you know, in the beginning, my promotional stuff. But yes, please do sign on. ACFAonline.org, and I guess /donate.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes.
So I'm going to start. And what I do with these webinars, for those of you who have taken them with me, and many of you I think have, I will talk, and then at the end I will have questions, because otherwise it gets, you know, I can get muddled if I start in between, you know, stopping and starting. And I can't really answer personal questions of my chart, because that takes into account your whole chart. But we'll see at the end if if we have anything that you can apply to your own chart. And this is going to be an hour lecture, I hope. I have so much material, and I'm not going to be talking about everything I know about eclipses. Like I said, it is one of my topics that I do. So we're going to try to just talk a little bit about the theory of eclipses. I'm going to put it on slideshow mode. And then I'm going to also talk about these eclipses. And today is really a great day, of course, because we have the eclipse. So that was one of the reasons also I thought, okay, this is a good day. We might as well talk about eclipses. And then if you miss anything in this, I think it's going to go up on YouTube.
Yes.
At some point. So anyway, so if you can't, I'm assuming everybody can hear me and see my handout pretty well. And so we're going to start. An eclipse, which also is called grahana in Sanskrit, is basically the act of seizing or holding. It's an occultation formed when Surya or Chandra, sun and moon. I don't know how many people here are familiar with all the Indian astrology terms. Some of you might be beginners. Some of you might be Western astrologers, but it's obstructed from view by a certain set of circumstances involving the Earth, Sun, and Moon. And that is really what grahana means, because graha, as you know, is the word for planet or planetary body, but it really is any heavenly body that they thought of as seizing. So basically graha meant that it took you over, it seized you. And early on, before they applied the planets to individual horoscopes, it was actually thought of in Ayurveda that the grahas were evil forces, and that was why people got sick, especially children, that planets kind of seized them. And none of the planets were particularly benefic or malefic. If they came too close and seized and held on to you, which is really what the term graha came from. But then as we went along, it just stayed and took on different meanings. It wasn't solely malefic. It had many different applications in the sky and in the chart. So the word Surya Grahana is the solar eclipse, because it's the occultation of the sun. Surya is the sun, and Soma Grahana is the lunar eclipse. These are just very quick diagrams, and we're going to start with the lunar, even though today is the solar. But the lunar eclipse only occurs at the full moon. Some of you might have heard my intro to some of these eclipses, because I usually start with this every time I do my year ahead or talk about eclipses. So it only occurs at the full moon, sun opposite the moon to be a full moon. And the Earth, we learned this in school, but of course, some of us, forget. So this is when the Earth comes between the sun and the moon. So it blocks the sun's rays from reaching all or part of the moon. And it is the outer or penumbral shadow, where the Earth blocks part but not all of the sun's rays. In contrast, when you have the inner or umbral shadow, that's where the Earth blocks all direct sunlight from reaching the moon. And that's when it forms a total rather than a partial. So each of these eclipses are, a little bit different in terms of whether they are partial eclipses and whether they are total eclipses. And obviously, when you have a total eclipse, it's more of a big deal. And as we'll see, the eclipses this year, we're only going to talk about the 4 this year. The lunars are all total. The solars are all partial in this particular year. And when you have, as we will see, the eclipses in a total position, usually the nodes are then closer. And when the nodes are closer, it means that the nodes will hit the eclipse degree sooner. And that's what I work with a lot in order for us to really understand the impact of the eclipses, which we will see as the lecture goes on. So a solar eclipse can only occur on the new moon. which is the sun moon conjunction, or UT. And it is when the moon then comes between the sun and the earth. So it blocks the light of the sun. And if the moon's shadow falls upon the earth's surface, then part or all of the disk is covered or eclipsed. And again, it has to do with when the umbral shadow strikes the earth, we have a total eclipse. When the penumbral shadow strikes the earth, we see a partial eclipse. It is the partial eclipses, like we have today, actually, when they are in the particular area where you live, that were considered to be dangerous. If you remember, there were some eclipses where they say, don't look at the sky. Those are not the total eclipses, because the total eclipse means that the sun is completely blocked. When you have the partial eclipse, it means that the uneclipsed part of the sun is still bright. And they say to use special filters. So actually, if the solar eclipse, and not every eclipse is going to be, exactly in your area. It really depends. So, you won't really have to worry about it too much. But once in a while, you will get that eclipse where, somebody will say, don't look at the sky. And those are actually the partial eclipses, not the total eclipses. So most of you know this, but so I'm just repeating it, that there are always a pair of eclipses that occur within 2 weeks of each other. So one is solar then lunar, or one is lunar then solar. It really depends. Every year it's a little bit different. Some people say that when the solar is first, then you're moving into a period of acceleration, and those two eclipses, mean growth. That's mostly because of the fact that we're starting with a new moon and moving to full moon. So it means we're in a waxing cycle. And then they say, this is in India, and I think most classical cultures or ancient cultures would say that when you start with the lunar and then go to the solar, you're going from obviously a full moon to the new moon, which you can't see. When you have a new moon, the sun is completely, the moon is blocked. It's new, and it's at that very, very, very first TT or Amavasya. So basically, you want to get a cycle where the solar is first, moving to the lunar. I will tell you that I don't always find that to be true, because if you have difficult aspects in the sky and difficult planetary configurations, then it's not going to make that much of a difference to go from new to full. But the whole idea is that eclipse periods, there's a lot of information all over the internet. So I have to say that I've had some people tell me information that they've heard from people, astrologers, some who I've never heard of, that are unbelievably wrong. And then other people who give wonderful information. So you really have to be discriminating who you listen to on YouTube and listen to, because, somebody the other day told me about somebody on YouTube who's talked about the lunar eclipse in 2 weeks, where the sun and the moon were in different signs, and that can't be, because they have to be at the same degree, either in opposite signs or in the same sign. As a solar is going to be the same, the lunar is going to be opposite. So be very cautious about, what you listen to online. It's really, very, very important. And there are some things that are not necessarily set in stone either. Some people feel that the eclipse season consists of the, let's say, the new moon prior to, or the fuller new moon, the lunation, prior to the first eclipse, and it goes for a month to the one after the next eclipse. So that would be a month long. I really focus it a lot on the 2 weeks, and then I focus it on when other planets, especially the nodes, hit the eclipse degree. Otherwise, you get so many, such a long period where you're worried about eclipses. And I think it takes away from the time that you really are, involved with eclipses. So I do think that for me, when I say eclipse season, I just want you to know that I'm referring to the 2 weeks in between the eclipses, which is today, April 30th, and then the next one is May 15th or 16th, depending on your time zone. Of course, that's when it's absolutely exact. I mean, the eclipse is going to have an effect for the entire day. But the eclipses are always going to be 2 weeks apart. So that means in a solar year, meaning from January 1st to December 31st, you're going to get an average of 4 eclipses a year. You're going to get 2 that are within 2 weeks of each other. And then 6 months later, you're going to get the next pair of eclipses. And there are times, of course, that you get 3 eclipses, and that would be a month long because they are 2 weeks and 2 weeks apart. So that's what happened, let's say 2018. You know, we had a solar on July 13th, a lunar on July 27th, and a solar on August 11th. And then in 2020 as well, we had June 5th, June 21st, and July 5th. This year we have 4, and next year we also have 4. And here are some just good websites, you know, that you can find. And of course, by the way, anybody who wants this handout, please email me, and I'm happy to send it. You know, I don't know when this will go on YouTube. So if you want some of the information that I put in this handout, I'm very happy to, you know, get notification from you, and I'll send it right off. So these are like nasa.gov, you know, pages in their website. I mean, nasa.gov obviously has a lot, and also it's great. You can even see the eclipses, especially the ones like we're going to get in 2 weeks, the blood red moon. It's really nice because, you know, even though they might say, for instance, that the next eclipse on May 16th you can see in New York, where I live, for like an hour and a half the time it's in the middle of the night, or the sky is foggy. So it's not always that if somebody says you can see it, you're going to be able to see it. But if you go on the website, a lot of times they have, you know, they will do it live. So nasa.gov is actually very, very good to get notifications from. And then these are some other ones. Eclipsewise.com is by Fred Espinock, who is an astronomer who actually created some of the NASA websites. And then alwaysspace.com, earthandsky.com. You know, these are not astrological, they're obviously astronomical. But of course, you know, the ancient people, they learned astrology by looking at the sky. I mean, it's only kind of our generations. Some of us now do look at the sky, and some of us look at the sky through, you know, online apps. We have wonderful apps now that we can get. But, you know, the thing is really that we are a generation, at least me, I am, that did not look at the sky. I mean, I went to the planetarium when I was a kid, which was great. And that's how I learned about the sky. And then, of course, at a certain age, I got a computer and I saw astrologically what the planets were doing, where they were. But, you know, many of us have lost touch with the sky. And I really hope that most of you who live in areas where the sky is clear and you can really see it, to do it. And also, I'm just going to just digress for 2 minutes and tell this story that I know some of you have heard before if you've taken lectures from me. But I had a doctor appointment many years ago, and it was in a time of year where a lot of the planets were retrograde. Jupiter was retrograde, Saturn was retrograde. And when planets are retrograde, they are from the position of Earth, they are seeming to be closer. So that's the time when the planets can be seen more, when they're retrograde, especially the outer planets. So I went to this doctor and I filled out, you know, the forms that you have to fill out when you first go. And most of the time in those days, even now, I don't always write I'm an astrologer. You know, maybe I'll write writer or consultant. And somehow, for some reason, I thought to myself, I'm just going to write astrologer. And then when I went into his office and we talked, he looked at my, you know, the forms that I filled out, and he said, "Oh, you're an astrologer." And I think he thought I meant astronomer. He said, "Have you noticed the sky these days? You know, we can see, you know, Venus and Mars." And he was like really telling me all the, you know, wonderful planets that were in the sky. And I said to him, "Oh, yes." I said, "Are you an amateur astronomer?" He said, "Oh, no, I'm a dog walker." He said, "Every day I go out and I walk my dog at night, and that's what I do. I look at the sky." So if you are a dog walker, I would say make sure you do that, because that's a great way of actually learning about the sky, you know, because you will have to look at it. You're outside. So anyway, I just always thought it was a great story. I always wanted to go back to that doctor. I didn't want to go back to that doctor, which I haven't, but I just thought he was really nice. So anyway, and why we don't have eclipses every new and full moon, and that of course is a whole astronomical explanation, but very simply, and this is from the NASA website, the moon's orbit around the Earth is tilted 5 degrees to the Earth's orbit around the sun. So the moon spends most of the time below or above the plane of the Earth's orbit, and the plane of the Earth's orbit around the sun is important because the Earth's shadows lie in the same place. So during the full moon, it passes above or below and can miss it entirely. So no eclipse will take place. But twice a year, the moon will pass through a portion, again, of that Earth's penumbral or umbral shadows. And that will, of course, dictate whether it's a full, a lunar eclipse that is full, or a lunar eclipse that, a total, not full, obviously it's full, a total eclipse or a partial eclipse. And then during the new moon, the moon shadow misses the Earth also as it passes above or below. And then twice a year, it lines up so that the moon shadow falls on the Earth's surface and an eclipse of the sun is seen. So that's why it's not going to have every lunation be an eclipse. However, it is, as we'll see later on, there is a certain geometry, to the eclipses. I just always start with this so you understand, and then we're going to go into the eclipses of this year. Like I said, there's so much material, so I'm just going to not do everything I know. But you can look on the NASA website, or I'm sure the British Royal Astronomical Society. I'm sure that there are many, many websites where you can actually look at eclipses and see what they are. Now, the nodes have a lot to do with eclipses. In fact, that is part of the formation of eclipses. So just very quickly, Rahu, Ketu are the lunar nodes. Rahu is the north node, Ketu is the south node, and they don't have shape or mass. They're places where the path of the moon intersects with the path of the sun. This diagram is from the Astrologer's Astronomical Handbook by Jeff Mayo, which is actually a wonderful, wonderful little book. And he talks a lot about retrograde motion and eclipses and everything else that just has to do with planetary motion. It's very, very simple. It's really geared to astrologers. It's probably available on archive.org or somewhere. I mean, the book itself is out of print, but it's a real little book. And I'm not sure about copyright, because if there is no copyright anymore, it's a good book to just, scan. Maybe I'll do that at some point if it's not available. Must be, though. The point formed when the moon has traveled from south to north is Rahu, or the ascending node. And when it moved from north to south, it's the descending node. And at new or full moon, if the moon is on the ecliptic near a node, an eclipse is possible. So really, it's when the orbit or the orbit of the moon intersects with the orbit of the sun. And usually, and I didn't on this, I put in path or orbit of the sun in quotes, because as we know, it is not the sun that creates an orbit. We go around the sun, but we are projecting it. And if we project it, that would be the orbit. So that's very important to understand. I usually do put that in quotes, so I apologize for that. And then, of course, the nodes are opposite. They're always 180 degrees. They move retrograde through the zodiac and through each sign in about 18 months. I use the true node, which means actually, and I'm not going to go into this in any great detail, but it means that the mean node will go consistently retrograde. The true node will go direct and sometimes retrograde. And you will notice that if you are close to an eclipse, like now, the true node will stay really fixed in 1 degree for quite a while. So if you're working with transits in your chart and you're working with transits of Rahu, you will see that difference. I mean, the mean and true node are different in degree at different times in the year. They could be, over a degree apart. Other times of the year, they could be just a few minutes apart. But the most important thing in terms of the difference, and you will see that when I show you charts in a minute or so, I use the true node, and I also use the Krishnamurti Ayanamsha. Most of you are going to use Lahiri, and Krishnamurti and Lahiri are only 6 minutes apart. They're really not that much apart. But I use it because that was what my teacher taught me in India, and he was a math professor. So I just always follow it, and I find for me it works. But it's, it'll be a little different sometimes, but not often. So the idea is that the nodes move retrograde always. They're moving consistently retrograde. and they go through each sign in about 18 months. And it takes 18.6 years for each node to go through the zodiac and return to its natal position. We call that a nodal return, especially if you do Western astrology, they talk a lot about returns. But, even these terms, doesn't matter if it's West or East, you can always use it, because the fact is that when Rahu comes back to Rahu, it's an important transit. And it's an important transit when Rahu hits anything in your chart, or Ketu. And then half the time, in about 9.3 years, you get the opposite situation. So you get Rahu coming to Ketu and Ketu coming to Rahu. And the nodal transits are quite important, so, that is why it's really important to note this. They're important in the world, because they just moved into Aries and Libra in, the Indian system and the sidereal system, but they're important also when you're tracking eclipses, because the nodes are close to the eclipses. It means that when you follow where the nodes are, so now they're in Aries Libra, you see that the eclipses are going to be in Aries Libra. So that's why it's really important to track the nodes if you're looking at eclipses. And they also change approximately every 18 months, with one eclipse maybe moving backwards into another sign. And it's very interesting, the 18-year cycle, because Rahu Dasha is 18 years, and I have a feeling, I'm sure, that it definitely had to do, if you're thinking of why the dashas, Vimshottari dashas, have certain number of years attached to it. That's another big riddle, which I'm not going to get into today. But I would think that the Rahu Dasha of 18 years definitely has a lot to do with the nodal cycle. And also the Saros cycle of eclipses that we're going to talk about a little later is 18 years as well. And that is also an ancient system. So even though it wasn't necessarily discovered in India, although it might have been also noted by Indian astronomers, they had to know about it because of the transmissions between India and Greece and Babylonia. So anything that you find, for those of you that, let's say, do Hellenistic astrology or Babylonian astrology and aren't really Vedic astrologers or students of Vedic astrology, anything that you find in those systems, you're going to be able to track in the Indian system, and vice versa. It wasn't just, as people tell you, oh, everything came from Greece and Indians adopted it, as if they were, just waiting for somebody else to give them information. People went back and forth, they traded, there was the Silk Road, there were sailors, and this whole idea of one culture giving to the other and the other culture receiving it, I think is a little bit illogical. So everybody was getting information back and forth. And so the Saros cycle is also 18 years. And it's where the eclipses occur in the same part of the sky that form a series. And then the Metonic cycle is 19 years. That's when lunations and eclipses repeat themselves. We're going to look at the Metonic and Saros cycle, these eclipses, in a bit. But again, the 18.6 nodal cycle, for it to go through the zodiac, 18.6 years, is interesting because, Saros is 18 and Metonic is 19. So I do think that they that appointing, let's say, the Rahu Dasha for 18 years, there's a reason, that it was 18 years. And it had to do with the fact that, they were quite knowledgeable about eclipse cycles. The Brihad Samhita, which is by Varaha Mihira, is really the big text that has to do with a lot of mundane astrology, meaning not natal astrology, not about birth charts, although there is some birth information in it. You will see that there is a whole chapter on Rahu. There's a chapter on each of the planets that have to do with their cycles. And in the chapter that has to do with Rahu, it talks a lot about eclipses. Not in the natal chart. I have not found in any ancient Sanskrit text mention of eclipses in natal charts. But like anything else, we over the years have taken many things that were written about and apply it to the natal chart. The same thing with something like Graha Yuddha, which is, when you have two planets in your chart, planetary war, where they are less than 1 degree apart. We look at that in the natal chart, But that was really a technique that was used for, you know, the world for mundane astrology. It was not used for natal astrology. I know sometimes I digress, but you know, there's so much information, so sometimes I just like to throw it in. So I think it's important though to know that a lot of these techniques that I'm going to talk about, you know, are things that I've just learned over the years. Some I've developed myself, and they really come from master astrologers. Many of them are tropical Western astrologers, but you can just apply them to your chart. So there really isn't a distinction at the moment between any, you know, classical Indian astrologer that used it for natal work that I know of. So anybody who uses eclipses are just using a basis of, wow, it's like a transit. You know, it's a Rahu transit. There was definitely mention of Rahu transit. So you can use the same principle for looking at eclipses, you know, in your natal chart. And so the nodes can have to be close to the sun and the moon in order to form eclipses. And this is just like a really technical list that, you know, the lunar eclipse may occur if the full moon is within 12 degrees, 15 minutes of a node. It must occur if there's a full moon within 9 degrees and 30 minutes. But the total lunar eclipse, this is the difference. These are lunar eclipses, but the total lunar eclipse may occur if the new moon, I'm sorry, that should be full moon. I didn't change it. This is, I'm sorry, this should be full moon. So I have to change this. If you send me your information and want the handout, that needs to be full moon. So if the full moon is within 6 degrees of a node, it may occur, and if the total lunar eclipse must occur if it's within 3. This is important because it does mean that when you have a total eclipse, this is how tight the nodes are going to be within the realm of the eclipse degree. And it can be, though, 12 degrees apart. The node can be 12 degrees apart from the node in order to be a lunar eclipse, but not a total lunar eclipse. And then the solar eclipse is even a wider gap. You can have a solar eclipse, you know, if the new moon is within 18 degrees of a node, 18 degrees, 31 minutes. It must occur if it's within 15 degrees, 21 minutes. But the total solar eclipse may occur if there's a new moon within 11 degrees, and it must occur if it's within 9. So you really can have a total eclipse when they are, you know, a fair amount apart. And this is, I started lecturing at 12:15. So if you think I'm going over, I'm really not. I am going to time it, so I'm not going to really go over, maybe a little bit. But I just like sharing this information. Rahu enters Kate. You know, these are the nodes and the ingresses in terms of when they entered certain signs. So we see that they are about 1.5 years, and right now we're in the Rahu in Aries and Ketu in Libra. That started in March 17th, and Pisces, Virgo. And again, it just simply means that those houses of your chart, even if they don't hit anything in your chart, let's say they don't hit any planets or any angles or anything like that, we know that they are going to be within those houses of your chart. So you have to have Aries and you have to have Libra somewhere. This is what you have to look at in terms of waking up information. And of course, we have other planets that are in those signs. But mostly when you have 1.5 years of the nodes in a certain sign and then eclipses in that sign, it means pay attention, because that's where you're going to have things woken up. You want to look at that. Nodes are malefic. Malefic, you know, malefic has gotten really a bad reputation. Sure, things can happen that are disruptive when you have transits of Mars and Saturn and the nodes. But really what a malefic is doing is waking you up. Malefic transits mean that you can't lay down and sit still or go to sleep. You know, you have to do something. And if you don't organize changes that you want to make in your life, somebody else will do it for you. So it really is kind of like taking control. And I look at Rahu, as it says in the scriptures, of acting like Saturn, Ketu acting like Mars. So the point is, when you have an eclipse, It's doing the same, but in a more intense way as the nodes. It's really waking things up. And a lot of things that you think were hidden are going to kind of manifest. And here I just listed all the eclipses because I wanted to show you that it's the same thing as the nodes. What you will have with the eclipses is they will track the nodes. So you will have eclipses in Aries and Libra, but then it will kind of have one eclipse where it might go back into the previous sign. So here we have, for instance, we had a few years, we see from November 2020, where they were Taurus Scorpio. You know, we had 6 eclipses in Taurus Scorpio. That's a lot. So if you have, wherever Taurus and Scorpio are in your chart, even if you didn't have something on those degrees, and I take like a 1 degree orb, what's going to happen is you are going to look back and say, wow, I really had like, not necessarily a hard time, I could have, but I really had to like pay attention to the area of my chart where I had Taurus and Scorpio. But to me, it's like a polarity, even if you have a solar, which is a new moon. So when you have a lunar, you know, the moon is going to be in one sign, the sun in the other. But even when you have a solar, if you had a solar eclipse in Scorpio, you know, on December 14th, 2020, I'm not going to go back to that, but that was when we had the counting of the votes. And that was when the, you know, Electoral College came up and certified the election. And this eclipse was right on Donald Trump's moon. So it was a heavy eclipse. But it also had to do with where Taurus was in his chart too, or any of your charts. I'm not going to go into politics. I just wanted to say that it's going to always affect the opposite sign too. And we see this November 2020, December, through all of the 2021, they were all in Taurus and Scorpio. And some of you may have heard about my lecture, and you might be Western astrologers. So please note, I am talking about the sidereal zodiac. It's very important to know that. So sometimes they're, you know, 24 degrees difference. And then you're going to get April 30th. That is the first one in Aries Libra. So this is like giving you a new, really a new outlook. It's telling you that Aries and Libra in your chart are where you now have to pay attention. The nodes already entered Aries Libra on March 17th. So you already got a hint, you know, as to what is going on. And then May 16th, that will go back into Taurus Scorpio. So you look, if you're doing a whole sign house system, you know, some people might use the Bava chart or use, you know, a Shripati chart. But if you use the equal system, which is the majority of people will use that, you can easily see where this is. And you can take that obviously from your Lagna or take it from your moon, take it from your Chandra chart. That is really super important. So you see it's going to kind of go back to Scorpio, meaning whatever was left unfinished in the last 2 years, this might be a reminder to get it done, you know, especially because it's going to be a total eclipse. So think back to, you know, what has been happening from 2020 all through 2021 up into the last, you know, till March. And then we're going to go back into this Aries Libra, and we see October 25th, the solar is in Libra, the lunar is in Aries, November 8th. The solar is in Aries in 2023, Libra, and then we're going to go into the Virgo Pisces because we're going to also have the nodes enter, you know, Virgo and Pisces as well in November of 2023. So that's kind of how this this happens and takes place. And then we'll get the Aries lunar October 28th, 2023, you'll have one back. So that's kind of how you should look at these, you know, eclipses and nodal transits. It's like, what can you do, you know, to wake up what's going on in the chart? And this is really just giving you a general idea, you know, about eclipses, because it brings intensity, energy, you know, wherever it falls. If it falls on an angle, a personal planet or point, you are really directly affected by that eclipse. It brings things to light, sometimes positively, negatively, but something gets revealed. It gets revealed on a world stage, and it will also get revealed in your chart. And that's why I always say, don't start anything during that eclipse season. Think about it. Think about it, and then you can slowly move into it, you know, especially those 2 weeks. is not a time to, there are people that have gotten married on an eclipse and have lasted many years. If you have to have surgery, you have to have surgery. I will never tell somebody to postpone a needed surgery because you're in eclipse season. However, if you come to me and you say, I want to have cosmetic surgery, I'll say to you, well, is it medical or is it cosmetic? Is it elective? If it's elective, just wait it out. If it's not elective, pick a good day, if you can, depending, of course, on your doctor's schedule. But, I'm a very practical, logical astrologer because that's my nature anyway. And, sometimes you're always going to look at the sky to guide you, but don't make silly decisions that are going to affect your health. Or affect a relationship or your finances. Just don't do it. Be aware. That's what eclipses are in general. An eclipse, in India, they always said when you did eclipses, go in the house, meditate, reflect. It's really a time of reflection because you don't want to make decisions when everything is going on around you. That's when you want to look at it and think about it. And then you want to make your decision, when it passes. So that's really important, if you meet somebody in a relationship during the eclipses, wait until you can really see that person for who they are, because you can, secrets can come out. And that does happen, and again, you look at what planet is being affected and look at the generic meaning. Venus is love, sun is father, moon is mother, family. But what does it do in the chart? That's like super, super, super important. And another thing is that if you have an eclipse on your birthday or a day before or after, if you have a new moon on your birthday, it's a time for a new cycle to begin. I find a lot of people have new moons on their birthdays will begin something new, but oftentimes they move. Not everybody moves, but that's often how the new cycle manifests. When you have a full moon on your birthday, it's usually a time of great achievement or something that you're proud of, something that you've really, really, really worked hard for. An eclipse will make it very different because the intensity could bring really endings and beginnings. I have found that when you have eclipses on your birthday or when they hit the sun and the moon, if you have a parent, sometimes your parent can get sick or retire, have a change. Or somebody, if it's your son, meaning if it's on your birthday, it hits your son. So it could be somebody older than you. Sometimes it's a male figure, or sometimes it's just, some dominant force in your life, because the sun is more dominant, the moon is more nurturing. So again, we live in a world now that we can't just say, male is one way and female is another. We have to get rid of those terms, but yet look at the nature of the planet. So if it's in your birthday and hits your sun, it might be somebody who has really been important to you as a teacher, as a guider. And if it's the moon, it can be a nurturer, somebody who provides security for you, and nurturing. If you have several eclipses within a year that hit a degree in your chart that's on an angle, or a planet, it means that there's really an important year. Look and see if you have several eclipses. And if it hits a lot of people in your family on family degrees, I have family degrees, that different people in your family might get affected. So now I want to go into the eclipses. I realize I've talked a lot for half an hour, but I kind of always think that this intro is important. I think that, because the nodes have to be near the sun and the moon for an eclipse to form, it's really important to take note of where the eclipse is and when the eclipse degree meets the nodal point. Now, for those of you who might be doing tropical astrology, this is not important in terms of zodiac. It's important in terms of the planets. The zodiac was something that was, kind of devised to give the sky direction, but, it really is something that is, man-made. It can be anything. You can divide the sky into 27 nakshatras. You can divide the sky into 28 nakshatras. You divide the sky into 12 signs. What's most important are those planets, because they're there. The relationship between the planets, how they interact with each other. It doesn't matter what zodiac there is. They are going to interact. So when you have the node hitting the eclipse degree, that is oftentimes when the nature of the eclipse manifests. And if the node happens prior, that means that might be when it was awakened. So just to now give you a little bit of an example of, how I look at the chart. And I have to say, I put Uranus, Neptune, Pluto in the charts. I did that because I know that there are a lot of Indian astrologers now, myself included, that do use Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. I don't particularly use them in the natal chart when I'm looking at an Indian chart, but I do look at them in the sky because I really think that they're there and you can't deny them. So I do put them in the chart. If you don't want to use them, just ignore them. But this is the solar eclipse of December 26, 2019. And, that was an eclipse that I never thought was going to bring great things. Number one, Jupiter is combust. A lot of people were saying, wow, Jupiter is in Sagittarius. And again, I use north, but I made north and south. Jupiter was in Sagittarius. It's going to be great. Jupiter's in its own sign. We're going to have a great year, a lot of money. And what happened? 3 months, we already had the pandemic in China during this time. But what happened February and March, if you look and see, Mars is a malefic and all these planets were super close to each other. So it meant that Mars at, in Scorpio hit that solar eclipse degree on February 22nd. We had a Mars K2 conjunction, which is always a very difficult one because K2 is like Mars. And then we had K2 conjoin the solar eclipse degree on March 22nd, 2020. And that was when we had the pandemic, lockdowns all over. So my point is that when you have a node and an eclipse that are very close, and here you can see K2 and the sun and moon are 4 degrees apart. So you know that K2 is moving to that degree fairly quickly. And this is how I time events and look at events, that when you look in the sky and you start to see how that happens, you'll note that a lot of times you're going to have things happen on certain degrees. That is going to be in the sky what happens, and it's also going to be what happens, in your chart. So when we talk about the charts this year, I have to start with November 19th, 2021, when we had a partial lunar eclipse. This is very important, especially for your chart, because these degrees where this eclipse hovered around are degrees that are going to be very important in the May 16th eclipse, because as we see, November 19th is very close in terms of the degree of the sign to May 16th. The sun was at 3 degrees of Scorpio. And what goes on here is, even though the sun is 3 degrees of Scorpio for this lunar eclipse, the moon, which is really what's getting eclipsed, is at 3 degrees of Taurus. And what's going to happen on May 16th is we are going to find that is going to be opposite. So the sun will be in Taurus and the moon will be in Scorpio, and it'll be at 1 degree. So if you have anything in your chart like at 2 degrees of Scorpio or Taurus, you are being affected still from what started in November. So that's why sometimes you have what's called these twin eclipses. We'll get to May in a minute. But my point to show you is that this was a Taurus. It was in Rikshira. So you could say it was in a Martian degree. And it was a partial lunar eclipse. But, the thing is, it was partial, but the nodes were quite close to the moon and the sun. So here in February 15th, Rahu conjoined the eclipse degree. So we can see here, Rahu is 7 degrees of Taurus. And remember, it moves retrograde. So it came to this degree February 15th. So, I kind of always look and think, okay, February 15th, something strong is going to happen. When did Ukraine get invaded? On February 16th. So the point is that it already was starting, all of the buildup that happened around Ukraine was starting months ago, so when this eclipse started, you could see that something was brewing. Did I know it was going to be Ukraine? No. Did I think it would be something that would also involve America? Yes. And Joe Biden's birthday is November 20th. So remember what I was saying, when you have an eclipse on your birthday, if you have a full moon, it's important. But especially because it's Biden's birthday. Now, I'm not going to go into if Biden's going to die or get sick. I know everybody always thinks that. I will remind you of the Great American Eclipse of August 2017. That Great American Eclipse happened at the exact degree of Donald Trump's ascendant. And everybody thought, wow, it's going to be something terrible for Trump. I mean, for those people who don't like Trump, they thought it was going to be terrible. I think for people who like Trump, they didn't particularly think it was going to be that terrible, but they knew something would affect him. Now, what happens in somebody's private life, I can't say. I don't know what happens in his private life, Joe Biden. I could say that the eclipse brought out things maybe about his son. Maybe it brought out other things that were going on behind the scenes. And maybe it's partly bringing out all this other news, about the real, nature, of the pandemic or the economy. And this also, though, was a time when Omicron started. So again, we had another bout, with the pandemic. We thought we were kind of out of the woods. Boom, then it started again. But my point is that when you're the president of a country or the king or the queen, that eclipse does not only affect you on a personal level, it represents the country. I personally don't even look at the American chart in terms of time. What time was the Declaration signed? I don't do that because there's so many different times. But if I look at the president's chart, every time there's a president, I looked at Clinton's chart for those 8 years. I looked at Bush's chart for those 8 years. I looked at Obama's chart for those 8 years. I get a better sense. Now, what happened in 2017 was nothing happened as far as I know to Donald Trump. But what did happen was that we had massive floods and hurricanes throughout Texas and Florida and Puerto Rico. It was disaster. And that actually happened when Mars came to that eclipse degree. So my point is that this is what's happening here. And this has a lot to do with America and our relationship to Ukraine and the world, because we are a power to be reckoned with. And also, like I said, if it's in your solar return, it's in your Varsha Pal. So this is not ending. This is continuing as the year goes on, in terms of Biden. Personally, probably, and the fact that it's affecting our country. And what's happening in our country is we have had this eclipse continually affecting us. Why? Because this Rahu conjoined this eclipse at 3 degrees, February 15th. So, okay, a lot of times you think that it's over and it's finished, because of that. But actually, that's not the case. The point is that when we get to May 16th, what we're going to see is, I'm going to go back to April, but I want to continue from November 21st, which is why I put it up, because this is an eclipse that I say is a twin eclipse to November 19th, because it's so close in degree. I usually take like a 1 degree orb, but if you have something in your chart at 2 degrees, that means you were affected by that eclipse in November, and you're going to continue to be affected in May. And what happens here is, like, sometimes the nodes will hit the degree of the eclipse prior to the eclipse, and sometimes it will hit the degree of the eclipse after the eclipse. Well, this one hit in March. So what that means is that if you take the nodes and the eclipse degree, the point where the nodes hit the eclipse degree as kind of like the beginning and ending of the effect of the eclipse, you could say that the one on November 19th ended around February 15th. However, this eclipse on May 16th began on March 3rd because the node was conjoining the eclipse degree on March 3rd. So by the time we get to May 16th, what you see, of course, is that the nodes are already past the moon and sun, because remember, it goes retrograde. So here it's past it. So what it means is that the nodes were really around that degree between February 15th and March 3rd. So really, the effect of the eclipse of November 19th has not changed. It's still in effect, and maybe we'll climax around May 16th because this eclipse is happening then. I don't know, but if you really think about what's going on in the country, it's not just the virus, it's not just Ukraine. The country is becoming so polarized, I mean, we always had Republicans and Democrats, but now it's become like everybody's talking about, red states and blue states and laws of repression and laws being overturned. And it just seems that our sensibilities are so moving to extremes. I really look at that as the eclipse. I mean, it's not just America. I mean, we have it in every country, you know, like really extremes running against each other. We just had the French election within range of the eclipse. So things with eclipses get revealed and things happen. So I do suspect that by May 16th, something else is going to take effect. And that's not going to be necessarily something great. And here's one of the reasons why also. We're starting now with the April eclipse. Remember, this is the first eclipse in Aries Libra, and that May 16th eclipse was the last one in Taurus Scorpio. This eclipse, and the reason I did put Uranus up there is we are really having a year that is very, very influenced by Uranus. We have an influence by Uranus, and for those of you who really only learned Indian astrology, Uranus is the planet of things that happen suddenly, spontaneously. It happened at a time when electricity was discovered, you know, in 1784, I believe. And so it really kind of, it's things that start and stop and things you don't have control about. On the one hand, it could be really exciting news. You might get great news that, you know, something happened to you. You won the lottery, or, you know, you've got that promotion you've been wanting, or, you know, somebody comes into your life. Uranus can be great. It can also be totally unexpected. You know, I'm not a financial astrologer, but, you know, to me, it's like the markets are so crazy, unstable. The economy is unstable. You know, a lot of people are using cryptocurrency. I think there's going to be more secrets revealed about cryptocurrency. So I do think that the reason I put Uranus in is because you see that it's going to be coming, you know, really close. And then what we have is in the month of August, Uranus and Rahu are going to be conjunct. And so when Uranus and Rahu are going to be conjunct, they are going to be within range of these eclipses. So it is kind of like a Uranian year. And Uranus takes 7 years to go through a sign. So it is now in the sign of Aries and in the sign of the eclipses. So this is one thing that we are going to have happening. And then we have this April eclipse. Pluto stationed retrograde yesterday. Again, I'm using Uranus, Neptune, Pluto. And, you know, I will say that B.V. Raman also put Uranus, Neptune, Pluto in his magazine. So it really isn't like Indian astrologers don't use them. But I have found over the years that oftentimes a retrograde will take place. When it takes place very close to the eclipse, it could mean an earthquake, it could mean major meteorological stuff, or, you know, something with governments, but it's very, very disruptive. It could happen within the next week, and hopefully I'm wrong. And I don't necessarily think it's definitely Ukraine, but it could mean that that war takes a whole other direction, or a war erupts somewhere else, or we do have a major earthquake. We had this, some earthquakes, like the Haiti earthquake in 2010 occurred when Saturn was retrograding really close, and things like that. I know I'm going over time, but you know, I'm sorry. What can I tell you? It's the day of the eclipse. There's so much to say, and things like that. What I do want to say about this eclipse is that it is partial, and you know, it was, you know, really seen in the Pacific and the South America, but it's not total. So when you don't see it 100%, I think the effect is also, except for this Pluto, the effect is not as strong. But we do have, on the day of the eclipse, a Venus-Jupiter conjunction. And I have to say that whenever you have something really nice, you know, that is going to be in a conjunction, or anything that happens on the day of the eclipse, it's important because it's happening on an important day. And if we look at this for the time that we had this eclipse, wow, Venus and Jupiter almost exact. Venus in Pisces, where it's exalted, and Jupiter in Pisces. And I have to say that, you know, I have no idea what is going to happen. I really don't. You know, but I have to say that Jupiter is also in its own nakshatra, you know, and, you know, who knows? Maybe we'll have some sense of hope. I think a lot of people are going to really want that hope. And I think wherever you have Pisces in your chart is going to be a place that you should look to see about where you can really make the most of things that are going to be happening throughout this eclipse season, you know, meaning through May. And I really want you to look at this and see that the North Node, or Rahu, is going to be conjoining that solar eclipse. Look, it's 12 degrees apart in January. that means that you have time. Wherever this eclipse is hitting you, if you have anything between 15 and 17 Aries, it's like a slow, I would say slow burn. It means that it's not as intense. The message is you don't have to change things right away. Take your time, think about it. It's super important. But look and see, of course, where Aries and Libra are in your chart, because as I said, they are kind of moving in that direction. These are where the eclipse can be seen. None of this eclipse can be seen 75 or 100%. That's where you find where things happen when an eclipse path takes you into 75. This means that in South America, you can see it 25%. I would say watch for things maybe in Chile, this next, week or so, if anything is happening. And like I said, this is this twin eclipse, the May 16th one. It's a blood red moon. It's a total. This year, all the lunars are total, which means you do get that blood red moon effect. And if you can see it, I know in New York, it is going to be visible for about an hour and a half. It is going to be visible on the East Coast. So what you want to do close to that, I'll put in my newsletter, is go to space.com, go to earthandsky.com, NASA. It will tell you exactly when it's going to be visible. And remember, this eclipse already started March 3rd. So it's been this last couple months of so much going on. And really, I think that that's the thing that you want to look at. And also remember, around now, this last week, the other thing that's happened around the eclipse was that Saturn entered Aquarius. So we are now entering a new Saturn cycle for ourselves. It's going to be in Aquarius. It's going to hover around. Then it's going to retrograde in July and June. It's going to go back into Capricorn, and then it's going to go back into Aquarius in January for 2 years. So again, as you're looking at the eclipse and where it is in your chart, look at Aquarius and think about what you have to finish up where Capricorn was in your chart, because it is going to give you one more chance, because Saturn is moving backwards into Capricorn, but then it's going to be in Aquarius. And when it moves into Aquarius, you're going to have for at least a few months Saturn in Aquarius, Jupiter in Pisces. So you always have to look at where everything else is. And this is this eclipse. It started in March. We have it in May. And then Mars is going to be opposite that lunar eclipse degree. It's going to be in Taurus in August 12th. So again, whenever Mars hits a degree, you also want to see, what's going on in the chart, because that's going to be also where something, might happen in the world. Again, these dates, whenever you look at these dates, it can be a week before, a week after, because they are within orb. But you will see, as I showed you in February 15th, these things really, really, are taking effect. And then we get to the fall, and we get to the fall with the solar partial eclipse, October 25th. Again, the solars this year, happen to be all partial, and the lunars, they happen to be all total. So again, in November, you're going to get that blood red moon. This is partial. Again, the partials are not going to be as intense because they take a while to manifest. And this one we can see really takes quite a while, because we're looking at the difference between K2 and the eclipse degree. And look what we see. I mean, we see that the K2 difference between that is 18 degrees. So it is really going to take a while for that to manifest. But what's going on, what makes the October 25th degree crazy and the fall crazy, and I am going to finish with, the election is going to be at that time. Mars retrograde, it retrogrades October 30th. And this retrograde, like every 2 years and, 2 months, Mars will retrograde, and Mars will retrograde through January 12th. It's going to be in Gemini, and then November 14th, it'll go back into Taurus. Then it goes stations direct and re-enters Gemini March 12th. So really, when you have, again, like I'm saying now, Pluto retrograding within a day, this might be another big deal. Mars retrograde, and remember, this is close to the election. And even though we live in a world, the whole world does not revolve around America, I have to say that whatever happens in America affects the world. And because whatever happens in America affects the world, I do think this fall, I mean, if you thought the election was crazy in 2020, put your seatbelt on. This is going to be a crazy election. It's still within, Biden's solar return, remember. I think there's going to be this eclipse season, October 25th to November 8th, a lot of resignations, changes. Sure, it could mean the House of Representatives change and the Senate changes, but it's going to go beyond that. I think there's going to be a lot of intensity. And, this Mars is retrograding 5 days after that. Could be something in the world that takes everybody's attention away from that. But it could be something within our cabinet. Here is very interesting, which I'm going to look at in a minute before we end. And that's the fact that we have Venus, Sun, and Moon all very close, all in Rahu's nakshatra, Swati. Now, here's the thing that I want to really make sure you understand is that we might look at Venus and say, oh, wow, that means that Venus is going to be part of this eclipse. It's in Libra, it's in the sign it rules. Not so fast. And I say not so fast. Why do I say not so fast? Because of the fact that, number one, we're also getting Saturn, aspecting the nodes on that eclipse, but Venus is combust. That was very important to the ancient people when they saw a combustion in the sky. So when you see a combustion, Venus disappears. It's still a morning star. It's rising before the sun, but it is, it's not yet. It's already, I think, an evening star. Sorry. But the point is that it is, it's conjunct, and it's in a superior conjunction, which means it's far away from the Earth. It means that you can't see it. So if you take Venus in Libra as fairness, and trade also, remember, Libra was the sign of trade. The scales, we've redefined the scales. We've redefined the scales as the scales of justice, but actually the scales had to do with being mercantile. So if you, and in Akva, I know when you learn about the signs, you see that Libra is the sign of trade and merchants. It's not necessarily only the sign of justice. So I think this is quite important. The superior conjunction was October 22nd, and the eclipse is October 25th. Venus is going to be exactly conjoining this solar degree. I don't trust Venus because the whole idea when I wrote that book that Charlotte showed you at the beginning is that Venus can be light and dark. And that is one of the problems. And I think this Mars retrograde. The other thing is that remember that Venus is the minister. Venus and Jupiter are the ministers. They're in the cabinet. So I think that this is going to be a really bizarre thing that's going to happen, not just in America, in the world, obviously, but remember that it's still in Biden's solar return. And this K2 is going to conjoin the solar eclipse degree in June because they're so far away. So that means whatever starts to happen in your chart, you have time, again, to work things out, but you're still working on where Aries and Libra are in your chart. And then we end, and I am going to, of course, as the year goes on, I do newsletters, I talk about eclipses. I will go more and more into this. This is, again, the eclipse path. You see that this eclipse, it's partial, but it's not going to be seen in America. It will be seen, though, in Europe and even in India. So, and in Russia over here. So I do think that because that Venus has to do with ministers and Mars is retrograde, I can't predict now what's going to happen, but I do bet that governments are going to be in a lot of, more disarray. And then we're going to end with the November 8th eclipse, and that is election day. So it's very interesting. We've had Mercury retrograde on election day. I don't know if recently we've actually had the election day on a total lunar eclipse. So this is total. We got the blood red moon, and this blood red moon will be seen in America, but to the West Coast. I believe it's going to be the West Coast of America. So this should be interesting with election results coming in. We're having eclipses. People want to know the election. Then we're going to have this eclipse exact, and especially to be seen in America and the West Coast. This is not going to be an easy election at all, even though it's not a presidential election. It's a midterm election. And the reason I put all this in purple was just to show you how Uranus is going to be hitting, those eclipses. And I see that actually this one, I left out Uranus, Neptune, Pluto. I am really, really sorry. I will have to put that back in. But in May 2022, Uranus is going to conjoin the lunar eclipse degree. That means it will be at 21 Aries. And again, if we go back to May 16th, or we go back to October 25th even, we see that Uranus was at 23 degrees of Aries just 2 weeks before that, November 8th. So back in May, it was actually conjoining what became this eclipse degree at 21. The eclipse is at 21, Uranus is at 21, May 26th. Then it's going to be back December 1st. Again, it's going to reawaken what's going on election day, or there's going to be disarray. We're not going to have, even though it's going to be the House of Representatives and Senators, there's going to be a lot of problems. And then March 14th, it will cross that finally. So I just put here again the fact that these eclipse degrees, this one again occurs prior to the eclipse. So we see that Rahu is going to be at this degree of 21, August 28th. So by the time you have this degree, it's already passed. So the life of this eclipse starts in August already. So keep note for these, what happens around, August, around the time that the North Node crosses it and then comes to the eclipse. Mars conjoins that eclipse degree. It will conjoin that eclipse degree on July 28th. Mars is retrograde during this election. So I would say starting when Mars conjuncts that lunar eclipse degree, we're also going to have something very intense in the world. And if these degrees hit your chart, again, it's going to be Aries Libra, but look and see if these degrees are within 1 or 2 degrees of your, lagna of a planet, because really what that's going to do, what that's going to do is really hit things. And so this is kind of interesting. I'm sorry, I do have Uranus here. My eyes, I was looking at it for here. Uranus is over here at Aries at 22 degrees, and it's very close to the eclipse. But you see, it's already conjoined it. It's then going to conjoin it again December 1st. Sorry about that. And then last, and then I'll have questions. I went 5 minutes over my time. This is from Brihat Samhita, and it's from Varamahira. I didn't even go into the Metonic cycle or the Solar cycle. Thought I was going to have time for that. But I will say that if you're a member of ESAR and you go to their library, I did a talk on the Saros and Metonic cycle of eclipses on January 30th. So it's free to members. It's free to ESAR members. They actually have a great library. And I can give you, again, if you write to me for this handout, I will gladly give you the information for that presentation if you are an ESAR member. Just that the Metonic cycle means we are repeating cycles from 19 years ago. So 2003 was another time when the eclipse of May 16th, the total eclipses, May 16th and November 8th, were at the same exact degree as they are now. So if you can go back to that year and think about if something happened, or even the house it's in, because again, they were also in Aries and Libra. And this is just from Brihat Samhita, and this just tells you what happens when planets should aspect an eclipsed the moon or the sun. And here you see that it says that when you have an eclipse over here, if you look below, I put 1025 and 11:8 because it talks about when Venus conjoins the eclipse. It means that women, ministers, tribes will suffer. I will say that they talk about the fact that when any planet hits an eclipse degree, people suffer. But this is specifically about ministers. And that does mean that it has to do with Venus ruling ministers. And I take that as being the cabinet, ambassadors, people who are also close to the president, not just here, but everywhere. So, but that is what I think happens. And then on 11/8, Saturn conjoins the eclipse degree and also has to do with minerals, people in, well, what they call low caste. But again, we're going to go back to the fact that when we have this, lunar eclipse at 21, Venus is opposite that lunar. So it does mean that Venus is aspecting the lunar. And here it does mean that Venus is conjoining the solar. So this is really the one that I think does have to do with ambassadors and ministers and things like that. Like, I have tons of material on eclipses, but I'm going to end here. And I'm going to open it up now to questions, comments, anything that anybody has to say. But mostly I'm going to say that these next 2 weeks, really meditate and reflect and, think about it. Don't necessarily run out and look at the eclipses, although this one you won't see. The blood red moon you might see, actually, if you're in the right area in the East Coast, So, so that's it. I'm going to finish. So if anybody else has questions, I think, Charlotte, you turn on the thing.
Well, Ronnie, there was a question from someone about whether you use the mean or the true node, and you'd previously said
that I use the true.
That you use the true node, and that it looks like you're using Parashara's Light's software.
Yes, I use Parashara's Light software. So let me go back at least to the eclipse of today. Yeah, I do use Parashara's Light, but you can use any software,
Yes, right. I mean, but that was a question in the chat. So,
okay.
So yeah. I think, really, you've done such a good job explaining the concepts, dear, that I think that there are very few, there actually are very few questions. You do have some appreciation. You have an appreciation of your work and gratitude. So, but actually, Dr. Lynn has a question about how the opposite side of the globe is affected by an eclipse. Well, there's an obscure question, Dr. Lynn. God bless you.
Well, Lynn, you can talk also. Anybody can
so
talk.
my logic on this is that if we look at our full tides and our tides at new moon and full moon, we know that they're high on the opposite side of the globe from the new moon. And so it's a research question. I know it's not covered in the ancient literature, but I'm curious if you've given it any thoughts. So for example, this eclipse today, the opposite spot will be somewhere in Siberia.
Mm-hmm.
So, and at any rate, I was curious if you have given that any thought.
Look, as an astrological rule, you would say that an eclipse affects us all, right? We're all connected, one world, all that stuff. If you're looking at it from a very, I think, not astronomical, but geological, or however you want to call it, I think that when I showed you like these, the eclipse path, and the eclipse path really is the fact that an eclipse will begin somewhere and then will go and it will end at a certain point. And some eclipses, like the one we saw in August 2017, that great American eclipse, it was a total eclipse. So we noted that the sky turned dark and it was traveled throughout the United States at certain points. But it still affected everybody, maybe on a symbolic level. I'm not sure about a geological level because they're not seeing it. Now, maybe the ancients would also say that if you see something, it's going to have a stronger effect for you. And that's why I think these eclipse paths, this is just 25%. But, when we had that August 2017 eclipse, it went right through Houston with a 75% visibility. So it went through like the center of the country at 100%. But if you took a certain number, like a certain number of latitude below and above, you had it 75%. And when I tracked it and looked at it in Solar Fire, which is actually a Western program, but it does these eclipses, that 75% went right through here, like through Texas and Houston right here, and then it went right through here through Florida and Cuba and Puerto Rico. So in fact, the eclipse has a much greater effect, I believe, on physically on where it's hitting. Physically, meaning we had hurricanes, we had floods. Symbolically, we do astrology in a little bit of a different way. So I think everybody responds to eclipses because, you know, they're going on, just like we all respond to transits. But I'm not sure scientifically how this eclipse would affect Russia. I mean, maybe somebody has a better answer than me, you know, but you'd probably have to ask a geologist or a meteorologist or something. So I don't know. I mean, your guess is as good as mine, to tell you the truth.
We do have a question from Julie Evans. Can you say when that great American eclipse will return on the cycle you mentioned, which I think she means the Saros cycle, and thanks so much.
Well, the Saros cycle is every 18 years. So, that was a particular cycle, you know, so that, but, you know, we are going to have another great American eclipse, of course, in 2024, another one that's going to be completely visible. And I think I remember when I was doing the research then that another one that was completely visible throughout the America happened around the time of the flu in 1919 or something. I mean, I'm just, you know, thinking memories. But if you have a Saros cycle and you go back to 2017, remember the Metonic cycle will hit you every 19 years on the same exact day. The Saros cycle, you know, is a little bit different because the Saros cycle, you know, that will be like, you know, every 18 years, and then another 11 days. So it doesn't, you know, so it doesn't quite be, it's not exactly 18 years to the day. You know what I mean? So they're always going to be on different days. I can go here and show you because I didn't say, it would have gone on too long, this chart. But for instance, 18 years, 11 days, and 8 hours. So this eclipse today in April, that will be next on May 11th, 2040. You know, when you're talking about the Metonic cycle, it's going to be the exact day. So if you look at the, you know, if you look at August 21st, I believe it was, 2017, really you just add 18 years, you know, and that will be 2035. And it's not always exactly the same spot in the sky, but the thing with the Saros cycle is that the nodes, the relationship of the nodes to the eclipse are exactly the same. So that's what the Saros cycle is about. Again, I didn't get to it because it would have been another 15 minutes. So, but the Saros cycle, you know, if you're on ESAR member, again, you can go to that or just look it up, you know, that how many days that is. So I can't tell you. The next great American eclipse is, I believe, in 2024, meaning that you'll be able to, I don't know exactly if it's going to be in the same place as the one in 2017, but again, it's going to be like total. In 1999, we had a solar eclipse on August 11th. And that took place, for instance, in Europe. So in the UK, you could see it completely also the same way that you could see the one in America in 2017. You can track them, you know, with software. The total eclipses, the total solars are the ones that travel. So that's why this year they're not going to be really total anywhere. They're just going to, you know, be like this 25%, but even 25%. And with Pluto, who knows? I mean, there's been plenty of earthquakes over the last few years in Chile, you know, in this area, you know, so who knows? And again, it's in the ocean. So there's a lot of times you can have things happen, but they're not things that stand out, you know, so, you know, but it doesn't mean it's going to happen in Chile. It just means that, you know, I always look and see where the percentage is.
So we have one more question, and this is from Eric, and I'm not sure if he's a Vedic or Western, but he says, what effect if eclipse happening exact mid-degree of 10th house, where there are no planets, where, you know, even if there's no planets in that spot?
Yeah.
And so I'm assuming he's using Bhava, you know, the Vedic Bhava house in description, but I'm not sure if he's Western, if he's referring to midheaven.
Well, you know, I don't know. I mean, the point is really Vedic Bhava. Okay, so I think that you have to just look and see you know, even if you're a Western astrologer and you're using Placidus or Porphyry and you're not using whole sign, you have to look and see which house, you know, that degree falls in. And that would be the house that would be coming to your attention and that you have to work out. Now, of course, it means that because even if it's in Aries and Libra for, you know, 6 more eclipses, because of the degree, if you use a Bava chart, it's not necessarily going to be in the same house. You know, it could change over. So it means just then you have to then shift your attention and see what it's affecting. I mean, it's easier, of course, if you do a whole sign house, because then you easily say, okay, the next 6 eclipses, except for May 16th, are going to be in Aries and Libra, you know, so that's where you kind of clean house, so to speak, you know, or things like that. But I think that if you're not using a whole sign house system, I mean, even if you're doing, you know, Western astrology and you're looking at it in Taurus and Scorpio, you still have to look at an unequal house system, the degrees. You know, when I'm talking about this, I'm addressing a whole sign house system, which even a lot of people now who use tropical astrology are coming over to use. So, you know, it's just, of course, easier when you're doing these kind of calculations because, you know, the sign equals the house. But if not, you just have to see where it falls, really. I mean, I don't know what, I mean.
Ronnie, thank you so much for your generosity in answering a personal question. But so do you, if you feel like we're at a natural stopping point now, I don't think there's any more any questions. I think, I mean, of course, there's inevitably personal questions, but I would say that those of you that are listening that would like Ronnie to address a personal question for you, you know how to reach her. You have her contact information, so maybe a session with Ronnie would be the way to go. But I did want to
go back to the first page.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but Ronnie, thank you so much for that wealth of information. My goodness, I'm in awe of your ability to just offer so much information. My goodness, this is like eating a pound of fudge or something like this. We're gonna take a while to. It's going to take a while to process this.
I mean, listen, I talk about eclipses a lot. So,
yes,
you know,
yes.
it's just, and then every year, I mean, I did at ACFA in 2019, I did an all day, wasn't all day, it was like 4 hours, you know, also about eclipses. But I think that, I mean, I know that there are people here who kind of do my year ahead thing every year, and they know the spiel of the first, you know, 40 minutes of the theory of eclipses, but I always think it's important. I think also that every year, you know, the beauty of astrology is that every year you have a new set of eclipses to look at, you know, every year you have, you know, new transits. So even if your theory stays the same, you have to constantly, you know what I mean? You're just constantly changing the eclipses and you know, where the nodes fall in relation to them. So
yes,
yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's an interesting year. Like I said, I mean, just the way I do it with the, you know, the whole. That's why I started with November 2021, because I think that, you know, kind of shows how, you know, between November 2021, November 19th, and May 16th is kind of like really we're still in that eclipse period, you know, what that eclipse brought.
Right.
It'll be interesting to watch, you know.
Yes. Yeah, that is part of the process, isn't it, too, as we're you know, observing and using our accumulated experience to help, you know, just to add to the body of knowledge of you know, what these eclipses actually will produce. And so we really appreciate, Ronnie, your time and your expertise. You know, this seems like such a simple thing to do. There's a lot of people behind the scenes that make these webinars possible. And so thank you all for supporting the Jyotir Vidya. And, you know, the American College of Vedic Astrology exists to train the next generation of consulting Jyotishis. I mean, we're doing our very important work in the world. So although we're a nonprofit, there's so many of us that are volunteering our you know, our considerable time and expertise and efforts. If you feel open to making a donation, Again, our website is www.acvaonling.org/donate. And
Oh, select donate, right? Not donation. And I have to say that Charlotte, Lynn, also you were in a student when I was teaching for Aqua. So Aqua actually has trained a lot of really great astrologers.
Yes, I feel that and thank you for helping us on our mission to do that. I've been a consulting astrologer my entire adult life, and I have to emphasize the fact to people that are listening in that becoming a professional, a full-time consulting Jyotishi or astrologer is a viable career choice. And the credentials that you get from ACVA, I think it's really important to, sort of standardize the professional credentials in the, for people in the outer world that want to, that want to have consultations and advice or addressing questions through qualified professional Jyotishis. I know, Ronnie, you've dedicated your life as a teacher. For heaven's sakes, you have exalted sun in the 9th house. God bless you for your work. Thank you.
Yeah, and I have eclipses right on my sun this year, so we'll see what happens.
And here you are in person. So we're feeling very appreciative about that. So in any case, there's a lot of resources available to people that are listening. It's a continuous process of education and learning and observing and experiencing the movements of the eclipses and the transits and dasha changes, and it's never a dull moment. Something is always moving around to contribute some level of raising of consciousness in our lives, which is the entire point of the planets, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Not to be seized by them, but to participate with the planets. So again, I think we'll close by again thanking you very much, Ronnie, and blessings to you and your family, and blessings to all the participants. And
thank you all for coming. I do appreciate it on this lovely day. Well, it's a lovely day here in New York. I see the sun is shining, actually.
Yes. A lovely day here in Phoenix as well. It was lovely everywhere. But so I unless I've forgotten something obvious, I would just sign off by saying again, thanks to all, and let us be very conscious of our individual thoughts, which definitely have an impact on the outer world in terms of creating peace and minimizing turmoil. So we all have to keep our little psychic chins up and be, again, as I say, conscious of our individual thoughts. But of course, I'm a person with 4 planets in Pisces, and naturally I would say something like that. But praying for peace, that's always I think that's has an effect on the grahas as well. So
we have Jupiter and Venus today in Pisces. It's an amazing conjunction, actually.
Isn't that lovely? Yes. So looking on the bright side, I think that there really could be, people can choose, individuals can choose to look on the bright side and act in terms of acting with compassion and inclusion. So, all right. So with that, unless there's something else to say, thank you for the ACVA team behind the scenes that are making this possible.
Definitely. Thank you.
Thank you, Ronnie, dear. And Ronnie, I look forward to seeing you in person, maybe at Arsha Vidya Gurukulam in June, and certainly at the ESAR conference in
definitely. We'll definitely get together at that one, or in Pennsylvania, it's easy to get together. So hopefully you can make it.
Yes, I'll do my best. So
that'd be great.
Okay, well, everybody, thank you again, and onward and upward till we meet again.
Thanks so much, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.